Welcome to another episode of Unleashing the Future of Work, a guide podcast. Today, I have a really special live episode with you today. What are the legends in the technology industry? Today, I'm joined by Jeff Barr, who has been working in the software industry since 1976. Since then, he has worked at a variety of large and small organizations, served as VP of engineering for a startup, worked at Microsoft and Amazon, and worked on his own as an entrepreneur. Today, he's the chief evangelist for Amazon Web Services, the largest cloud provider in the world, where he gets to tell the AWS story to audiences all over the world. And today we're going to get really geeky. We're going to talk about tech, we're going to talk about AWS, and also how he got his start in the technology industry. And more importantly, what are some of the trends that he's seeing in the cloud industry or just tech in general right now, and his tips and suggestions for anyone that's looking to start a cloud computing company or a software as a service company. And really, what are the essential skills that leaders like Jeff or like you who's watching right now that's trying to build a business need when it comes to leading very distributed teams in a remote first world. So I'm really excited to start this conversation with Jeff. And without further ado, let's go ahead and bring him on the show. Hey, Jeff.
Alrighty, happy to be here, Tim. Thanks for the great intro.
Thank you for finding time to be on the show, man. How are you doing? How have you been hanging there during COVID-19?
It's a really interesting time because I actually do love to work from home, and even in pre-COVID-19 times, which seemed like 50 years ago, I would generally work from home. I'd say almost half the time, and sometimes I would even go to the office for the morning and do the things that were best done in person, and then walk back home and continue on from there. Now it's all these four walls of my home office. They're great walls, and they're made exactly the way I want them. But sometimes they feel like they're just kind of closed in a little bit. And I've found it's more important than ever to make sure that I get out, that I spend time with my wife, that we spend time online with our friends.
Yeah.
The sun comes up really early now in Seattle, so I try to leave the house at 6 and take my dog for a couple mile walk, just fresh up in the morning. It kind of points out to me one thing really important right now. It's very important when you're working from home to let your job stretch into the whole day. You have to be, I think, very, very conscious and a bit disciplined and say, okay, here's my starting point. Here's the stuff I do to switch myself into working mode. Yeah. I'm working for a bit, and maybe I do some homing from work, as we now like to say, in the middle of it. But at a certain point, say, you know what? I'm actually done, and I'm closing my laptop. I'm maybe walking out the door and hitting the light switch. Give yourself a little mental reminder that actually there is a somewhat discrete boundary between your personal time and your work time.
Yeah, no, I think that's so powerful, Jeff, because especially now, people are trying to recreate their boundaries due to the fact that everyone's working from home now. I would love for you to share a little bit more about how long you've been working in the tech industry and how you got your start. Taban, my co-founder, and I, we're huge fans of your work, and Taban is a huge fan of the work that you've done and the legacy that you've left in the tech industry. So I would love for you to share with our amazing community, how long have you been working in the tech industry and how you got your start in it?
Okay. One quick thing has my camera frozen for you? It looks like it's frozen for me here.
It looks as if it has frozen. Yes, on my end.
Okay. I'm going to switch to my other camera and
no worries.
See what happens. Let's switch to that one and turn that one on. Okay.
Oh, perfect.
All right. I've got a high-res camera right behind my laptop, but occasionally I think it produces such high-res content that the laptop can't always keep up. So we'll just switch to backup laptop camera. Let's see. Anyway, so background, I got started in tech really young. And the thing that I remember from the early days, I actually was working in a local computer store in Seattle, in a little neighborhood called Green Lake. I got this really fun after school job when I was a teenager.
Wow.
And I was my official job, I think my official store title, I think my friend said I was going to be the janitor. He brought me in. The actual excuse, he said, well, you can come in the store and do a couple of things to be useful, and you can have access to the computers. Now, this was 1976, 77, when simply going hands-on with an actual computer for more than a few minutes was a really tough thing. So what it turned out to be that I would actually do at the store, there was never actually pushing a broom or something like that. what I mostly spent my time doing was all these boxes would show up full of new books and new magazines, and I would just unpack all these things and put them on the shelf. And as I'd unpack them, I would look at the title and flip through them and say, oh, that's kind of neat and kind of interesting. Very quickly learned to keep track of the industry just by simply reading all this great information as it was passing through my fingertips. I'd put it up on the shelves. I'd do my best just to read little bits and pieces. Sometimes I'd borrow something for the night and bring it back the next morning if I wanted to read it on the bus. So this gave me a great sense of the tech and of the industry when I'm still, I think I was in 11th grade at the time, and then also between 11th and 12th grade. So I've got this good sense of the tech. I understand it pretty well. And as a result, when customers would come into this little tiny store and start asking questions about these, and this is the days of the Altair and the IMSI and processor technology, SAL, these things you actually now see in actual museums. I was there at the dawn of this. So people would walk in and start saying, so I see this thing over here and I see this, and will this connect to this, or can I do this? And the other store employees maybe hadn't spent as much energy in studying as I had. So they'd say, go talk to that kid over there in the corner. He knows what's up. And they'd ask me questions. And I found my niche of simply understanding things and being able to explain them, and to actually just enjoy that, being that bridge between here's some really cool tech and here's a customer that needs to know something about it.
Yeah.
Let me do my best to understand this person, who they are, where they're coming from, get a sense from the question they ask of where are they? Are they totally brand new and just wandered in out of interest, or do they already have some level of understanding? And then just quickly tailor the way I talked to what it is that they need to know and explain it. And four decades later, I'm kind of doing just about the same job. So
every single day, and you love it. So early on in your career, did you feel as if you had to try multiple things out to realize that, hey, this is the sweet spot for me, being that evangelist, that technical communicator for people who may not really understand what's happening in emerging industries?
Oh, absolutely. And that's a really good question, because early on in my career, I was at a startup and I was VP of engineering. I was helping to build the products, but there was a sense within the company that our products were so awesome that we really didn't need an actual marketing team. And I never actually agreed with this philosophy, but the founder had this, he thought it was like, wow, if we build stuff that's awesome enough, people will just show up. And I'm like, that's really never, ever worked in the whole history
of business, right?
So I took it upon myself to just always take conference invites and go out and do the same thing again. Just simply go out, go in front of audiences, explain what we built and what it did and how it would benefit customers. And back, and this was probably 80s, early 90s, the idea of a title of an evangelist was just coming into visibility late in that time period. So there wasn't an actual job description for what I did. And especially it's interesting, our industry's evolved a lot, because just a couple of decades ago, it was a lot more important that you actually were in a very well-defined position and a role, and it was something of a standard role. I think now, maybe because I'm more mature in the field, or the field has changed, there's a little bit more room to invent your own position and your own and make it your own, versus just saying, well, we need to really fit you into a predetermined job description.
Yeah, and build your own brand too, right? Because one of the things that's really awesome about you is that you're known worldwide as Jeff Barr, because you have an amazing brand and you've built a really amazing community as well.
Oh, well, thank you. So I do agree that it's part of what you get to do is to build a brand, but I think coming from the tech side, there's a really delicate balance you have to strike, where to me, it's about you do your job really, really well, and then you do some neat stuff on the side to enhance your brand. I think you have to walk into the job saying, my primary job is to spread word about this cool tech, and if I can create an identity and a brand as a nice side effect, I think that's good. I've occasionally seen people come in and say, okay, the evangelism is all about me, and they try to focus on themselves versus on the tech and on the customers. It doesn't tend to end well. You want to just do your job, and then very, very judiciously, as part of that, say, okay, well, I'm going to stand for this, and I'm going to do this, and one thing I've found, for example, in my Twitter feed's probably about 80% of my work stuff, but the other 20% might be walking around Seattle, walking with my wife, walking our dog, my Lego hobby, my 3D printing hobby, stuff like that. Just kind of give a sense of other things I care about as a person, kind of just fill in those little details. And that hopefully makes me a bit more interesting, but also maybe create some good points of conversation where people say, oh, I see you do this, or I see you've got this kind of dog, and does yours behave like this? And kind of interesting things like that are just making more than just the corporate person.
I love it. I love it. Shout out to Jeff for that. So shout out to my co-founder and our CTO at Guide, Taban Cosmos. He says, hey, my friend Jeff Barr, so awesome to see you on our podcast. Good vibes. Thank you so much, Taban. Shout out to you. Much love, brother. Shout out to Pete Smith, who is saying greetings from Texas. An excellent career story from Jeff Barr. Shout out to you, Pete. Thank you so much for tuning in, man. Mr. Robert Walker, accounting professional, has tagged Niyama Gyalmo. Nice to meet you. Shout out to you all. I'm happy you all are having a conversation in our comments. You know, Ricardo Smith is asking, he's a software developer at Infosys. He's asking, Jeff, what are some of your favorite publications?
Oh, wow. So publications are a whole lot different this decade than they were for most of my career. So back in my computer store days, there was this awesome magazine called Byte that published for a couple decades. That was the magazine everybody would read to make sure that you knew what was going on. So there was Byte and InfoWorld and quite a few others back then, and you'd eagerly look forward to those every month to say, okay, what's the newest and the latest and greatest. I'm not quite sure what today's equivalent is, and for most of my computer tech stuff, I generally start either on Reddit or on Hacker News and just find links to interesting articles from there. So you get a very eclectic mix. I do find that one thing that's a little bit troubling is I do a lot more short form reading than long form reading. And I used to be someone who was always had like 5 books going, and I'm always kind of reading different things in parallel. And I don't know if it's the world has changed or I've changed, but I find myself reading a lot more short form content than longer form content. And I've actually had to do a little bit of just internal course correction and say there's so much good longer form content that there's something about today's world that things that are a couple thousand words long are more digestible than chapters and entire books.
Yeah. Everyone's looking for bite-sized quality content, right?
Yeah, exactly. And you know that's a really interesting comment, because one of Amazon's leadership principles, we have 14 leadership principles, and one of them is called frugality. And most people hear about frugality and they think about it in terms of money. But when I'm writing my blog posts and when I'm working with the other bloggers, we actually think of frugality in terms of audience time. And so we try really hard to make sure that we get all the facts across, but we don't produce posts that are multiple thousands of words long as we go. As they always say, it's much easier to write something long than something short. And so we try very hard to be complete but concise. And it turns out to be a really interesting writing skill to get all the right details in, but not get just too flowy. There's a sense when a blog post gets too long that instead of reading it, people just park it off on a tab and never ever get to it. So we try to practice quality.
It's true. I love that. Shout out to Shagun, who's saying greetings from Indiana. Great insight, Jeff and Tim. Thank you so much, Shagun, for tuning in. Shout out to Ricardo, who's saying thanks, Jeff.
You're very welcome. Thank you for
and thanks, Jeff, for answering my question. So, Jeff, I would love for you to kind of share a little bit more about, post COVID-19, every organization is looking to adapt now, right? Everyone's going remote first. You've mentioned that you've worked from home for quite some time now, and now you're being forced to even more so due to COVID-19. What are some of the technology trends or even organizational trends that you're noticing or keeping an eye of in a post-COVID-19 world?
Great question. And one thing that underlies a lot of this to me is that we all have to be awesome communicators. If we want to earn the trust of our colleagues, and if we want to say we're not going to get together in person face to face, and we're not going to have somebody looking over our shoulder to make sure we actually show up, I think a sense of responsibility, and then a really good ability to communicate to your peers and to your management, say, okay, this is what I'm up to. These are my accomplishments. These are my challenges. Because if someone can't see your work, it's only what you tell them and what they can see that's actually the results that you produce. So I think it's really important to communicate. I think that we're also learning that so many things that we thought were best done in person, there's some kind of a reasonable online substitute that maybe some of the things that we see right now, they're brand new. We're still trying to figure out, is this the right way to do it? I try to be really understanding and encouraging of all these new kind of efforts I see, where someone says, here's a thing that we used to have to come see me in person, and now I've invented this new way to do it online. I think as a fan and a consumer, you want to recognize those efforts and give people a lot of feedback and encouragement, and make sure that they recognize the fact that they're actually innovating sometimes under very, very difficult circumstances, and cut them a little bit of slack, give them some time to innovate, do your part as the consumer to say, okay, this is what you tried, this is what worked, these are some parts I think that maybe you can think of are the different ways to do it.
Yeah, no, that's powerful. And I think, what I love about what you said is that now we have to level set on really good, effective communication methods that build trust, right? Because now that people are working in a remote environment, I love what you said. The, proof of work is only what you tell and show. Right. And I think for us, even within Guide, we're really adamant about the fact that you have to show your work. Taban and I, we're always saying, okay, look, I just completed this, or I've just done this. Right. So that's just a way for us to keep each other in check and hold each other accountable on the progress that we're making. And I feel as if that's powerful. Do you think that, because Amazon has really powerful leadership principles, so you all have been, kind of adhering to them for quite some time. Do you think some organizations are going to have to reconsider how they think about communication within their workforce?
I really think they are. And it seemed to me that at the point when, for example, in Seattle, when Amazon pretty much said it's time for everybody just to stay at home and work from home, we had been doing so many conference calls. So we have an app called Chime that we use internally and that we also make available to customers. Before the beginning of March, we did Chime calls all the time, but we always did them in audio form. And Chime has actually a really good video conferencing feature as well, with no actual corporate-wide directive. We spontaneously all decided that yes, we're all going to do video chat. It just spontaneously happened, and being able to see my colleagues in their natural environment has actually been kind of interesting, because some of us have a luxury of a home office and we can define exactly what our working space is. Others, their children are still at home. In addition to being workers, they're now having to parent. They're having to be teachers and disciplinarians during the day. You see that pets often like to intrude and just kind of pop into calls. And it actually, none of that bothers me in the slightest. And in fact, it reminds me that everybody is dealing with some different kind of really just crazy situation. And I just need to be really understanding and empathetic, and just do more than my part to make sure that I can, if someone's got a challenge, and I've got colleagues where they've got no actual childcare for their young children. Yeah. So the partners are basically alternating 2-hour blocks on and off. So one is caring for the children, the other one is working. I mean, imagine what that does for your ability to focus when it's two on, 2 off for 4 shifts throughout the day.
And it makes empathy more important than ever in today's day and age.
I think so. I mean, there's some really interesting challenges, I think, of what conveys and what doesn't convey when we're on the screen. And I've got some friends that do telemedicine. They're in healthcare, and they tell me that dealing with people in crisis and getting body language and what they say and what their body tells you can be 2 different things entirely. So they're learning really a new set of skills to say, okay, I'm talking to this person and something's not quite adding up. I need to have a little bit more. I need to ask some more leading questions. And interestingly enough, the experiments that I've heard so far, the results have been very positive. That a lot of this telemedicine has led to better results. And some people thought it was just a substitute. I've got a friend who is a sleep doctor, and so in the past, in the past, his patients would visit him, and he's got his nice wood paneled office. I'm sure it's really, really nice and fancy and really dignified and everything. He can't go in, he can't see patients, so he's seeing patients remotely. And he said that not only is it effective, but that he now has this ability to, ask the patients, well, maybe it's something about your sleeping conditions, that your environment isn't quite right. Would you be okay giving me a tour of your bedroom, basically, and show me your lighting conditions, show me what else? And apparently this has led to some better outcomes for his patients, where it's like, oh, your window shades don't close all the way. Actually a real challenge here in Seattle, where we're far enough north that the sun comes up very, very, very early in the day. And
yeah.
So those kind of things, you would think, okay, first it was a disadvantage, but then we quickly find out, oh, there's actually this interesting surprise that we didn't know about. So given that a lot of my job is about recognizing creativity, recognizing innovation, and encouraging it, there's massive amounts of displacement and dislocation, and there's a lot of awful things happening. And my heart goes out to everybody, and I'm doing what I can to help in some of those situations. But at the same time, these disruptions come in and it shakes up everything, and it then gives some new opportunities to people. And I try to stay positive and say, okay, here's a neat new thing I saw, and let's encourage that. Let's be a really good fan of this new way of living, and see if there's ways what we can take away from that to help make our future better.
Yeah, I love that, Jeff. I love that so much. So shout out to Camilla, who's saying, hey, Jeff, wonderful to meet you.
Hey, Camilla.
Congratulations on Amazon jumping into high fashion with CFDA. Will AWS be adding technology to help its retail supporters?
That's a really interesting question. And I wish I knew more to say about that. I'm not even quite sure what CFDA is. We're a really big company, and it's thoroughly impossible to know all the different kinds of neat things that go on. I'm not actually really aware of what we're doing in that space at all. I do know that there is a lot of thought, not just within the company, but the industry at large, of if you can't go to a store and try things on and see how they look, what is the next level to do that? And personal shout out, my daughter Grace actually works for an AR VR startup where she is doing just that, where she's actually able to the company she works for, they are doing things like virtual shopping, where you can actually, on your app, you can wander into the store and you can see the shelves and you can inspect goods and make purchases and so forth. And so there's always room for technology to jump in. And the thing is, there's a lot of things that a quarter ago we would have said nobody would do that. That's why bother? Yeah. And suddenly we're now pushed into this really interesting corner that says we're in our houses. We've got, in a lot of situations, we've got really good communication. We've got an almost literally captive audience of people that are desperate for something to do. We've got good quality communication in lots of situations. Mix it all up, and what interesting thing might be able to come out from that. So I think, just like if you look back in history, both kind of human history and almost like archaeological history, and you say, okay, well, there were cataclysmic events that have happened on the earth, asteroids and meteorites and things like that, and forest fires and earthquakes. In the wake of all that, you then get new growth. And I think that's what we'll see. Like here in Seattle, we have Mount St. Helens, which I guess was about 40 years ago. Mount St. Helens erupted. Big volcano, the top 1,200 feet or so of the volcano disappeared. Lava flows, and everything around it was burned to a crisp. But in that clearing of all the dead trees and dead vegetation, something new springs up. And that's the hope that keeps me going. Just kind of thinking like that.
I love it. Great question, Camilla. So she is building a company called Savitude, and she's really interested in the AI design whole thing to help eliminate excess inventory for designers, because they don't like developing or dealing with that problem. So Taban asked Taban is mentioning, what I love about Jeff is that he loves human connections and relationships. And believe me, I've learned a lot from Jeff with his love for his family and friends. Beyond just a smart guy, an absolute great person to have as a friend. Shout out to Taban showing love to Jeff. And if you all have any questions for Jeff on leadership, as well as what other trends he's keeping eye out for. Make sure you mention it in the comments. So, Jeff, I want to talk to you a little bit about to the entrepreneurs who are out there watching us. What are your recommendations for entrepreneurs who right now they want to start a software as a service business on AWS cloud, perhaps?
Mm-hmm. I think this is a great time to do it. I think that we've got awesome tech, and like I said before, we've got this captive audience. I do really think that people are more receptive than under normal conditions to something new. And you look at the number of video apps that we're all using on a regular basis, and I look at the number of different video things plugged into my computer, and within the last 2 months, I've used probably 6 different applications. Like we're using StreamYard right now. I've used 5 or 6 different apps to do various kind of call-ins. Yeah. We're learning all about how to optimize for video. We're learning how to do video production. Lots and lots of different parts of our houses are now turning into these either impromptu or well-designed TV studios.
It's so true.
Right? We're suddenly thinking, wow, what can I broadcast from my office or my living room or my bedroom or my bathroom? Sometimes I've seen people in their garage, and there's these new situations that are out there, and like what can we do to make that more efficient, to make enable things that couldn't have happened before? Like one of the interesting things, just to throw out a totally random idea, there are events in Seattle I used to go to that were live events, and you go to the live event and there's a nice big audience, and it's a lecture, it's a musical performance, it's comedy, it's a concert, whatever it might happen to be. When you're the performer, you get this awesome sense of your audience out there, and you can see the people. And if you're a first-class performer, you absorb their energy, and you build up that energy in your audience, and you then that encourages you as a performer to be even better. And the thing that's a little tough with a broadcasted event, you don't get that same sense of audience. So
and presence.
Yeah, the audience, the presence, the ability for the audience to applaud and give you feedback. So I think there's some really interesting ideas there for, is there a way to add on to existing apps and communication tools? I don't even know what it is. A fake audience, a virtual audience, a mobile app to do applause and thumbs up and thumbs down to performers. Just something that says the audience is out there. They are responding to what I do, and they're giving me some kind of feedback in an interesting way.
Yeah,
just random idea to kind of throw it out there. So I would take advantage of the fact that people are in this just new, uncharted water. They are maybe they're more open than usual to trying out something new, and that this is the time to find one of those needs. Now, one thing that we always do at Amazon is we don't have a traditional R&D lab where we invent random cool stuff and then send it off to the world to see if the world likes it. We're always saying, find some customers, talk to those customers, really understand their needs, make sure that you actually understand the problem to be solved. And then what we do, we call it working backwards. We say, start from the customer and work backward into an actual solution. So we're always, at any point when you talk to a new team and they're building something with it on AWS, they will be able to tell you, this is the kind of customer we're building for. And if you dig in a little bit more, they will say, here are the 50, 100, 150 customers that we talked to get a really deep sense of what this problem is all about. Now, that doesn't mean that the first iteration of anything we launch is going to meet the needs of every one of those customers. Part of being a product designer, you have to make tough choices. You have to say, here's a long list of things we could do. Reality has to actually step in and say, we're going to just figure out what is a subset of those that we're going to do just to get things going, get that initial version in front of customers, and then iterate very quickly to fine tune it based on their feedback.
Preach, Jeff. I love that. And I'm often having to tell people that every single time on LinkedIn is that the beauty of the process is it's in the iteration, it's in the development, and you want to make sure that you get it just right, that minimum viable experience, right? As you mentioned, working backwards from the customer, and then say, okay, what's that minimum viable experience that they deserve, and then you can build upon and continue to add value.
Exactly. So we actually have gone a little bit past minimum viable, and we actually do MLP. We call it the minimum
Mm.
lovable product. So
Wow.
minimum viable, you can tune down to the point where you can convince yourself that yes, it's good enough. We think minimum lovable is a little bit of a tougher threshold to make sure the first one we launch, will people truly love it? And we actually ask ourselves in our review meetings, is this one actually lovable yet? And do we have the right things? Or, you know, sometimes when you are making tough decisions and you say, well, this feature's a little tough, but if you hold down this button, then you go over here and do this other thing, and then you wiggle a little bit, it's a workaround. You can convince yourself, but the customers aren't going to always see that level of effort as worthwhile, or they're never going to remember it.
Yeah, it's all about what does the customer love,
Yeah,
not what you love.
Right? You want them to have a great experience with that first one. A manager I had a long time ago said that software you build should actually be kind of like an arcade game or a pinball game where you put your money in for the first time. That first quarter you spend, you should get a really good experience out of it and say, okay, that was worth it. But there should be a lot of depth behind it so that you can actually you can spend months or years actually mastering that game and keep getting more value out of it. But that first experience actually has to be a worthwhile one so that you're thinking I should come back and keep on trying.
Powerful. I love that. So shout out to John Healy, who is saying, love the adaptation to MLP, minimum lovable a product. I love that too, John. I think it's a new one that I'm gonna have to add to my arsenal. So Jeffrey is saying, hey Jeff, what's your opinion on startups, pharmacies like PillPack and Capsule?
Oh, wow. I wish I knew enough to actually say anything about either one of those. This is kind of odd, but I don't actually end up consuming a whole lot of medication on a regular basis. I've just fortunately been really healthy. So I know a lot of people have chronic needs for medication and they really need a steady supply of medications. I'm by genetic accident haven't ended up needing a whole lot in the way of regular medication. So I'm not the target customer for those, unfortunately. Fortunately or unfortunately.
Great question, Jeffrey. Very interesting. A lot going on in health tech right now. So definitely see why you asked that. So Amazon continues to dominate the cloud computing space, Jeff. What are some of the things that you think you all have gotten really, really right that allows you all to continue leading the pack?
Okay. So interesting enough, we would never talk like that internally. We never, we are very, we never pat ourselves on the back. We never say, we've got this, we're done, we're the best. We tend to be pretty humble about our accomplishments and always realize no matter what we've done, there's always a lot more that we can be doing. Yeah. It really does come back to solving real customer needs and going all the way back to the very, very beginning when we launched things like S3 for storage and EC2 for compute power. Those were two very, at this point now, seem very obvious kinds of things, but they were revolutionary when we launched them. We launched S3 and said, this is storage for the internet. And very, very simple thing, but people looked at that and said, yep, I see that. I see the value in there. And we're now many, many years, we're well over a decade into S3. We still continue to add features to it. We still continue to innovate from there. And the same with EC2. EC2, we launched that in 2006, and we still continue to launch new features, new instance types, new ways to scale, new ways to build more and more reliable systems. There's always room to make any of these things even better.
Yeah, humility, and I love the humility that you mentioned that Amazon brings to the table when it comes to developing these solutions. Right, you never want to get high on your own supply, as they say, and always be obsessed about the customer. And I think I love that perspective. And I think one of the things that is more important now than ever is, as leaders, if you're leading a distributed team, humility. And also that empathy that you were talking about earlier is really important that you bring into the business and product development process. So everyone understands that, the end goal and the end outcome is, how does the customer feel?
It truly is. One thing I love about our customers in particular, and Jeff Bezos has said this before. He says the customers, I don't know his exact phrase. I think he said that they are wonderfully, beautifully dissatisfied, something like that. It's kind of like no matter what we do for them, there's always something more they can ask for. And we love that. We love the fact that we launch something and right away. Now, a lot of my earlier career before web services was more in packaged software and shrink wrap software. There were so many challenges with doing software in that way, because you'd build it, and then at some point in the development process, you do beta testing. It took a long time to get feedback from your beta testers. At a certain point, you would say, I'm finished, and we're going to actually start manufacturing. You called the gold disk, and you start actually replicating. And then you'd actually get that into boxes and you ship it to customers. It would take months and months and months to actually have this feedback cycle work. If customers bothered to find you and send feedback to you, you were already well into planning and execution of your next dev cycle before you could actually hear back from your customers.
Wow.
With web services, you build something, you put it online. The first 24 hours, you can actually start looking at usage metrics and say, we launched it yesterday at noon, and today at noon, how many users did we sign up in the first 24 hours, and how many objects did they create, and what did they do? What feedback did they leave on Hacker News and Reddit, and did they tweet at us? So you get this incredibly tight feedback loop, which we love because we get the information. And part of if you want to be kind of a good customer, maybe that's a weird word to say. If you want to be a good customer, send us lots of feedback. Like don't say and use it and just say, yeah, this is good, and don't kind of wish in your head that we need to add a new feature or do something different. Let us know. And I think almost anybody building products there's always this sense that surely somebody must be doing the feedback, but if everybody thinks that, then nobody will. So you want to actually be that person that reaches out and does the feedback or makes the complaint or does the bug report. I have this weird personal philosophy I call 2 is better than 0.
What does it mean?
Okay, so the thing is that there's a lot of times where you might, and I noticed this a lot on my walk to the office. Back when I walked to the office, you see like I don't know, water leaking from a pipe on the street, or you see an abandoned car, or you see something in need of some attention. And it's so blatantly obvious that you think surely somebody would have reported that by now. Yeah. And then you walk past it for a couple of days and no one actually has, because they all thought that. So I decided that when I see those things, I will almost always figure out the right way to make some kind of a report to whoever can take care of it. On the sense being, it's far better that that agency or person gets 2 reports than gets 0 reports. And so so just it's a simple little thing to do in almost every case. Like in Seattle, we have this really cool phone app called Find It, Fix It. So if you're walking down the street and you see something in need of maintenance, if you see a broken sign, if you see water seeping up from the street, you stop, you take a picture, you put in a little report, you send it in through the app, they send you a ticket number, and they'll even call you and say, hey, we investigated and we checked this out, and this is what happened as a result. So
there's actually a problem here.
Yeah, and they're often just little things, but it might be a little thing that 100 people walk past and no one bothered to actually say something. So I found that always being that person that just takes that little extra couple seconds to do that report is worthwhile.
2 is always better than 0. I love that, Jeff. Jeff, thank you so much for being on another episode of Unleashing the Future of Work, a Guide podcast. What is one inspiring takeaway that you want to leave to our amazing Guide community?
Oh, man. Inspiring takeaway. I think we're in a historically unique time, and I think everything seems unbelievably crazy right now, and because it is. Take advantage of this moment of rapid change, and make sure that your physical security is good and you and your family are good. From there, figure out if you got energy to create and innovate and move something forward into the future. This is a time to do it. And if you do something really cool and want to share it with me, please reach out and let me know. I'm very easy to find online and love to hear from people. So
I love it. I love it. This is the time for you all to create, innovate, and build the future. I love that, Jeff. Thank you so much for coming on our show and being such an inspiring leader. And please make sure to follow Jeff on Twitter, where he shares a lot of photos of his dog and his wife and his walks.
Thank you so much, Tim.
All right, Jeff. Good to see you, man. Bye.
Bye. Been fun.
Awesome. So if you loved this most recent episode of the Unleashing the Future of Work A Guy podcast. Make sure you check us out on our website, UTFOW.com. If you're interested in being a guest or a sponsor for a future episode, we truly appreciate you all for tuning in. And once more, like Jeff said, if you're right now building something that you love and are passionate about, build it, create, innovate, and don't give up. This is the season and it's the time. And more importantly, leverage AWS cloud software to do it. All right. With that said, peace, love, and talk to you soon, community. Bye.